Welcome back. And so the next leg of our conversation sort of ties in beautifully into this one. But of course, we're going to be looking holistically at waterfront development in Lagos. And joining us on this segment is the Commissioner for Waterfront Development in Lagos, Mr. Dayo Bush Alebioshu, who joins us right here in our Lagos studio. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
And welcome to the program.
Thank you for having.
A very happy New Year to you.
Oh, I wish you the same.
Yeah.
I wish you the same.
So let's begin from Makoko, and I'm glad you, saw a bit of the exchange with a community dweller and, of course, a development worker in that community, and you're up close with some of the challenges that have arisen as a result of government's demolition. And so, how do you respond, first of all, before we look at, the ideals of it? How do you respond?
Well, I would always say that homelessness is not something that's pleasant in any way. However, it's also important to know that the role of government isn't to create problems, but to find solutions. Talking about Makoko, I'd heard that some of the demolition had been attributed to waterfront infrastructure development, but not at all. I think it was carried out by
physical planning,
urban development, I would say, urban regeneration and things. I'm not aware. However, I know that certain things were taken into consideration before moving in. Like, for example, that stated the nearness, the closeness to the power line. I mean, this is not something we should toy with at all. And I remember that at the Federal Executive Council, they had also mentioned things like dredging close to the bridge, keeping a distance from the bridge, and so on. So there have been quite a number of things. I'm also aware that, well, from my findings, I was made to understand that a particular location had been gotten for them, but that they had been divided. Some were happy to go, some weren't happy to go. You'd always see things like that. Unfortunately, there's the saying that you have to, for the flower to bloom, it has to get wet a bit. I feel for them, but I guess government has to do what government has to do in order to save lives. A lot of things were taken into consideration. I remember there was a time when meeting with some people who had come to complain about, on both sides, you'd see those who want to stay and you'd see those who will highlight some of the dangers in their continued stay there. But now they're not saying they should leave completely. From what I've picked, they're saying they should keep behind a distance from the power line. But further questions would have to be redirected to urban, the Special Advisor on Urban Regeneration.
Well, I'm wondering about the propriety of it all, particularly for those who are helpless in the light of the circumstances. For instance, we saw Benjamin there putting up in his home and saying he doesn't want the government to come and demolish his home. If he had an alternative, he probably would not, stand ground where safety wasn't guaranteed. So the question really is, and it ties also to Oworonshoki demolitions, the absence of the provision of an alternative for the people in the light of an inevitable situation where government indeed has to uphold its physical planning rules. That is what we haven't seen in the continuing demolition so far in Lagos State. Either it's Oworo or Makoko.
I'll step in with, if you remember, Makoko, both Oworo and Makoko, particularly Makoko, has been an ongoing issue over the last, I probably would say over the last 23 years. There's been this back and forth. And I'm aware that there's no way under the sun that government would moving without prior notices, not notice, notices. For example, when I had engaged, like I said, I was born in Koshofe, I grew up in Koshofe, Oworonshoki is in Koshofe, and I couldn't stop them because it was the duty of another ministry to do that. However, in doing some findings, they had said that as far back as almost 2 years ago that they had been warning them, they had been engaging with them. I will give you an instance. In my case, I'll cite a particular case in the Lekki axis. Over the last, I would say, year and 3 months, we've served about 3 notices, and every time after we've sealed it about 3 times, and guess what happens? He goes there and he breaks the seal, he moves in, and by the time we go back 3 months later, he's developed another building without approval. Now, when we finally move in, which we would have to do this week, the first thing that would be assumed is that he wasn't given enough time to do this, without being aware that we've been engaging with him over the last year and a half, or over the last year and 3 months. And from what they had said when I got in touch with first of all, I thought it was physical planning, and I was directed to urban regeneration, and then they had said it was an urban regeneration project on another completely different side of Oronshoki, while we were talking about bringing some projects into another side of Oronshoki. But we have a lot of people. Creative thinking is not only in writing. There are people who would create things and sell it as real. They're 2 completely different ends of town, and how they're mixed together is something that still beats my imagination as we speak. But it's another completely different side that's under physical planning or urban regeneration, while the side of the jetty and the reclaimed land that we have in Oronshoki is under the purview of waterfront infrastructure development. When you have projects like that, you would have environment, you would have transport, you would have waterfront, you would have different people coming together, and they have different duties to perform, different functions to achieve. And it's very easy to assume it's one person or the other. Some even mix Ministry of Environment and Water Resources with Ministry of Waterfront and Infrastructure Development. I guess it's the sound of water that triggers the assumption.
I can imagine somebody doing somebody else's heavy lifting because of nomenclature. So on one hand, physical development, urban regeneration, waterfront development, it's a mixed bag of many things. So
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll have to get the right set of people, the exact commissioner who is in charge of this. But staying with you, because you grew up in the area and you're in government, so you may do some of the heavy lifting this morning for us. So the argument here, before we move on to your ministry and what you're doing, is that there was an understanding with them. Initially, the proposal was 250 meters. Then they negotiated to 100 meters. And then I even hear from the lady that they negotiated to 30 meters. She's alleging that government has gone beyond even 100 meters. What do you think is happening here? Is somebody not saying exactly what it is? Somebody lying? What do you think is playing out here?
I don't think so. Sometimes, I'll give you an example. Using my ministry, excuse me. In the area of reclamation, I think it was an EXCO decision before I even joined the EXCO to have a distance of 250 meters between islands. And it was policy. After I joined, I called to their attention that we couldn't use a blanket style, depending on the topography and a lot of other things that have to be taken into consideration. Now, I used the example of a funnel. There's a reason why at the top the funnel can take a lot, but it narrows in so that it gives it the pressure for that to go. So we said now, not every case would require a blanket 250 meter setback. In some cases, we can look at it from 150 meters, between 150 and 250. Where 150 would work, then we apply that. Now that changes, but that decision was informed by research, information, data, and you don't stick to what it was when you are exposed to new developments. You would have to change and tweak those measurements. So they must have had a reason for having those changes happen.
Okay, so let's, well, this is, as I said, Honorable Commissioner, we'll get your colleagues to come and answer for themselves as far as this is concerned. Let's come to your own ministry,
Okay.
Waterfront Infrastructure Development. As you said, do not blame us when we mix up everything. We can even say your water development and all of that.
Don't worry, I'll keep highlighting.
Talk to us about, because I'm more concerned about, you've traveled around the world, and a lot of you have traveled and see what waterfronts can look like, the potential of a properly developed waterfront can look like in terms of transportation, in terms of tourism, and the list goes on. And you had your, I think, your summit not so long ago last year, which I'm sure expanded the conversation around potential investors and what the ministry is doing. Maybe you walk us through what the ministry is doing to change the outlook of Lagos State waterfront.
We're doing quite a lot, and I have to be thankful to Mr. Governor for the continued support in that area. It's not like it's automatic. You have to sometimes let Mr. Governor see things from the angle from which you're looking at things, and sometimes you have to look at the angle from which he looks at things. At the end of the day, it's about getting the best result. For example, we just introduced 5 different jetties, the use of floating concrete pontoons, which had never been used. We were trying to have them last longer. I think the research, when we were working on it, had said about 30 to 50 years, requiring minimal maintenance. We'll be commissioning some projects very soon, some jetties at Boiketo in my constituency, in Ibejuleki, the Badagry, just to mention a few. I think there are about 7 of them that we will be commissioning. We've gotten approval to locate a jetty in Oworonshoki. Of course, it's also
in the same Oworonshoki.
In the same Oworonshoki. Now, there are 2 different
So
ends.
have the reclamations and demolitions created room for this jetty, just for clarification?
They have absolutely nothing to do together. They're on 2 different ends.
Okay.
How do I say? Let me give you this example. Look at Ikorodu Road. You hear about Fade. Fade, there's to the right and to the left.
Okay.
Now, demolition is happening
On
to the
this
left.
side.
Okay.
And to the right side of Fade, we're bringing, I mean, this is what we had thought that will help enhance. I mean, imagine where we put a jetty there at the foot of Oworonshoki, a housing scheme at the foot of Oworonshoki. We're talking about the land that was reclaimed by Lagos State, is what we're talking about now. We're looking at how can we pull the island, the hype of the island to the mainland where it starts from Oworonshoki. What are we talking about? Now, when you look at Ilupeju.
So sorry, so it overlooks the water?
Yes, it's banked by the lagoon.
Okay.
The jetty is banked by the lagoon.
Okay.
And it's supposed to serve everybody. I'll give you an instance. Close your eyes and imagine going all the way to Berga. I mean, from here, if you were to go to the island, it would, from this location, it means you don't have to drive all the way. You can park your vehicle at Oworonshoki and hop on a 12-minute ride to Awolowo Road, Laswa. It's about 12, 15-minute ride. Look at the decongestion it would afford the 3rd mainland bridge. Now, all the way to GRA Ikeja, Okpebi, Allen, Ogudu, GRA, Bagada, Anthony Village, Maryland, Ilupeju, everybody will benefit from that. So close your eyes and imagine all of those people, or half those people, parking their vehicles and hopping on the ride. Imagine what it will do to the property value in that area, the economic value in that area, amongst many other things. Now, this is the intention in the first place in bringing that there. It has completely, it's over, the distance apart is over a kilometer apart, if you were to ask me. So it has completely nothing. The demolition has to do with urban regeneration. Now, I'm going to tell you that there's a waterfront scheme there. There's a scheme that belongs to the Lands Bureau. There's a scheme that's family accession, where it's owned by the local.
Is this a plan or is it in the works?
No, that's the situation at hand.
Okay.
So the demolition exercise is going on from the scheme of the Lands Bureau to the excision area. My area of concern is the area by the lagoon that was reclaimed by Lagos State. So that was why I started off by saying that, well, I would say it's creative thinking to think that the reason for bringing the development there is because of the demolition. It has nothing to do with each other completely.
Yeah, okay. So one of the resolves of your ministry, according to what we're hearing, is, to transform revenue generation from waterfront infrastructure in Lagos for the year 2026. And that's exciting to note. But talk to us about the strategy and the waterfront infrastructures that will be adapted to this revenue sharing, particularly the management of Lagos beaches. Is there a more creative approach to ensuring that they become tourism attractions that are, stable, steady revenue earners for Lagos?
Well, I also read the part where it had talked about revenue generation. I don't want us to look at it like that because it can be misunderstood, or it can misinform the people thinking that the drive is solely about revenue generation. That's not what it's about. Yes, we require a lot of funds when it comes to waterfront infrastructure, a whole lot of funds. I don't even think any government in the world can handle that all by itself or by herself without engaging the private sector. Now, in the area of reclamation, I would say in the past, sometimes someone to reclaim 50 hectares, 100 hectares, and then they tell you, oh, they're paying 10 billion to the state. There's a particular estate that I'm aware of right now. I think the going rate on the market, Shoreline Estate, is about 4.5 billion as we speak, for 1,000 square meters. And when I was
1,000 square meters.
For 1,000 square meters, and when we were we were sworn in as commissioners, it was going for about R1 billion. So let's assume that Lagos State had decided to engage, which was the case anyways. If they had paid Lagos State 10 billion naira then, everybody would have been dancing thinking, oh, they got a great deal. At the end of the day, by the time it's completed, that would have been the cost of just 2 plots of land. And we're saying, no, it's better we do revenue, it's better we do a sharing rather than impose such heavy duties on them. It was a policy change. It was approved, it was accepted and approved by Mr. Governor. He shared the same opinion when it was pitched to him. And we're saying, rather than earning 10 billion, if we were to get, say, for example, in 100 hectares, even if we were to get, at worst, let's even say 20 hectares out of that, do you know what that would be? That would be close to 90 billion as against the 10 billion that Lagos State would have earned. And that way, Lagos State would also be able would afford to putting world-class waterfront infrastructure. Like we said, everything we're working with right now are things of moving from now into the future, rather than pulling the past into the present.
And I'm glad you talked about the fact that it's not just about revenue generation.
Not at all.
And I want to refer to 2 incidents from the end of last year.
Okay.
I believe, I'm hoping that the Lagos State Water Authority is under your ministry.
No, that's LASG. They're actually under the Ministry of Transportation. However, I'd
There's
say
a handshake.
Close to 90% of their functions is pretty ties in with Waterfront.
So there's a handshake with the Waterfront Ministry. There was a boat mishap that occurred, I believe, in the Niger Dock area part of Lagos that led to the death of 6 persons. And then there are many incidents of, the abuse of shoreline, people, throwing things, and because we're very traditional people in these parts, throwing things into the sea to appease the gods or for, profit benefits in the year. And those are very disturbing, human activity that impact negatively, not just on the people that live there, but also on climate change in general. So this handshake with the relevant ministry, because we've talked about how confusing it can be about which ministry in charge of what. This handshake, does it also incorporate service that ensures protection, safety of people on waterways and protection of the environment?
As a matter of fact, I have to give it to LASG. They've done a great job. They continue to do an amazing job. They've been completely outstanding. Now, a reason why we keep going after illegal dredgers is as they lay pipes, they hide pipes. Boats don't see them. Their focus is mainly on commercial benefits rather than, I don't think adequate consideration is given to the value of lives. And that's why we continue to we continue to go after them, we continue to make arrests. It's a lot to deal with, but it's something we will have to continue to deal with. It's an ongoing thing. There's a saying that as the hunter thinks of killing the prey also continues to think of escaping the hunter. So it's a vicious cycle. We continue to go after each other, after them, just to make sure that the right thing is done. I mean, dredging, like I've always said, is something that's required. We can't be here right now without dredging. However, what we're talking about is indiscriminate and unapproved dredging. There are certain areas, I mean, look at sand today. From the mainland, when I talk about the mainland, I'm talking about the Lekki-Koyi axis. Now they're going as far as 10 kilometers to get sand. And prior to now, you could practically dip a bucket in and come up with as much sand as you need. Now, what that tells us is that's a sign that we have to be very careful. When I continue to compare and bring the plight of Dubai, where after they were done with reclaiming Palm Jumeirah, which is a huge tourist attraction to them, they ran out of sand and they had to continue to import sand from Australia, I believe. Now, if we're beginning to go as far as 10 kilometers to get sand, it means there's something going on and we have to be careful. But
10 kilometers?
Yes, go do your findings. Now, when you're being tough on it, it's considered that government is not friendly. That's not the case. We have to protect everybody. Everybody. How do you explain those lives that were lost, that you just referred to? Because somebody somewhere just wanted to reclaim land, wants to hide it as much as they can. There's a lot going on.
But there are other aspects of safety that are required on the
there's so
waterfront.
many. If you look
the
at
need for more marshals.
They do have. They have. I call it last man on water. They came up with a policy to say you can't be on water after 7 p.m. because those guys also have to close. You can't even go on water without it. They don't care who you are. Even if you're the governor, you're going to have to wear life jackets and going on water.
That's the least you could do.
Yes, and we continue to see people quarreling. Even I've noticed this a couple of times when they insisted that they weren't going to go close to the jetty without putting on their life jackets.
So how many more have been employed? How many more last mile water have been employed in recent times?
I know that they were giving, I think they were talking about, I have to be careful not to misinform because I'm getting the figures. I'm not sure if it was 100 I heard then or 1,000. I would rather not misinform. But I know that the moment you get to those jetties, you would see them there.
Okay, as we begin to custom carefully, I'm also interested beyond the safety issues of the water. I'm also interested in what I consider geo-mapping of the ministry in terms of your outlook for 2026 and even to the end of the term of the current administration. So perhaps for those who are not familiar with Lagos, you can help broaden the scope as to what exactly you're doing here, 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 here. I deliberately left the holes for you to fill in.
I will give you an example. We have just completed a design wanting to put up a boardwalk running from the Link Bridge to the Wole-Olateju axis down towards the down towards the oriental side of things. It would be the first. We're looking at converting the Bariga Jetty into a modern-day fish market. We believe that in that case, we're collaborating with the Ministry of Agriculture, where the state is also able to help reduce the price of fish. I mean, sometimes I don't understand how you dip your the fish you've caught from our waters you sell for even more expensive than the cost of a huge cow, as much as £1 million for fish. And we're looking at how that will bring that down. We just got approval for the jetty at Oworonshoki, and also to put up a waterfront housing scheme there. We have we've gotten approval for a waterfront housing scheme at the Oniru area. We are waiting for approval for 2 schemes along the Lekki Ekpe axis. The jetty at Agboiketo has just been completed. We're done channelization works from Odoyalaro, which is to feed and support the bridge coming from Okpebi to that axis. And my question is, that's there, how will the community benefit from it? So of course we're looking at being able to locate a little jetty there, so that keeps movement keeps going fast. Ebute Lekki, we've completed our jetty there. We're going to be opening that soon. We've already started deploying those pontoons into 5, I think, white sand, Agboiketo, and 3 other locations. There's a lot going on all at the same time.
So the water economy is really in the works. So one of the things that in the build up to that is to say, do you have an idea of how much this will cost, or this is public-private partnership? Because I know Lagos budget is big. I think about 4-point-something trillion. That's the size of Nigeria's budget as at 2014, 2015. Just you can imagine. So in terms of execution, cost, funding style, can you walk us through it?
Well, some of them would be partly funded. Some of these projects will be bonded projects, partly funded by the state. Some of them are PPP projects. Some of them are, you know, with the Omieko thing also coming up, more jetties would spring up just to make sure that water transportation is completely, I mean, is utilized to its benefits. There are different costs attached to different areas. There's some locations like the Oworonshoki is supposed to be big. There's some locations that aren't small. Just like when you look at the tube, the subway in the United Kingdom, you see some that just have kiosks. You see some like King's Cross that are huge. The same thing applies here. It depends on the ridership in those areas. There's some areas where you find out that you may have 1,000 there. You wouldn't expect to have such a big one there. And there's some locations that actually enjoy a lot of patronage that you would have to give them. So studies are carried out, and that is what determines the kind of design. So to sit here and give you all of those costs off the top of my head would be...
But perhaps what you can give us is, because as Jeffrey has said, the water economy is huge, and you've mentioned land reclamation and the promise of other areas for revenue generation for the ministry. So what do you project to be the contribution of your ministry to the internally generated revenue for Lagos State annually, if you can go by what you earned
the projection, I think the projection of last year was about 15 billion, if I remember well. It was about, of course, it keeps changing. We continue to get better, and of course, it continues to increase. And that's why we're able to achieve, you know, those revenues that we generate does not remain in the pocket of waterfront infrastructure. You know, it goes in there and then you justify some things. For example, there's a jetty now that we have to address as a matter of urgent importance to fix before it becomes. It wasn't something that we had seen coming. So we have to source the funds because we'll have to deal with it as a matter of urgent public importance. We don't want lives lost before we...
And you surpassed your target last year.
We were, for example, I think our budget performance was about 97%.
In terms of generated revenue?
Yeah, it dipped in the last quarter. We surpassed it by 300% in the second quarter. By the third quarter, it dropped to, I think it was below, it dropped to about 80% of what our target was. And of course, at the end of the year, it dropped further. But when you look at it, you see that it has its seasons when it rises. And sometimes we have to leverage on the relationship to say, listen, we have to sit down. Like when you owe the bank money, they don't come after you with a big stick. Sometimes you have to sit down first to dialogue before you you move on to the big stick where it's required. So we actually did very well in terms of our revenue generation.
So compared to what is allocated to the ministry, is the ministry surpassing the budgetary allocation in terms of IGR it is making for the state?
I would say last year, yes. We struggled a bit with the previous year. We've just continued to get better by the year, because what we do is we sit down and look at where did we go wrong? What can we do? How do we come up with policies that will not impose unnecessary hardship or responsibility on these guys? However, where there's a will, there's a way. We sit down, we work those things out.
So what's the IGR target for this year?
I think
17 billion, 20 billion?
Well,
we're big on the money this morning.
Yes, we've been back and forth. I don't want to scare people, but I think we still have it at I think 15 billion. I think we still have it at 15 billion.
Fantastic.
And of course, if we can surpass that, that's the intention.
I wanted to find out who was, because of the nexus amongst ministry, who was in charge of, I've forgotten what it's called, the Formula One kind of race that happened on the waterway.
Okay, it was a thingy with tourism, and particularly transport. I think those two were the big players there. The only role we had to play there was to have developed the infrastructure for it. But because of the peculiarity of those boats, they had to come with collapsible jetties. So at that point, we had to step back a bit to say,
and
okay.
That's one of the reasons that our expectations from the Lagos State government are high in every aspect of national life. The Lagos State government is making a lot of money, and this is feedback, sir. We would hope that in the future there'll be a human face to the ongoing demolition, such that there'll be an alternative provided for the people, regardless of what the ideals should be. Maybe they'd be giving them notice and all of that. But displacement is certainly...
you see, this is a time when everybody has
to... It's not very comfortable for the people.
I do understand. I'd be a hypocrite to sit here and say that I do not understand their plight. But again, I would say that I'm a member of the EXCO. I swore to an oath. So whether I supported it and I lost out, it's a decision of the EXCO that I have to stand by.
All right.
I will not exempt myself. Right. But however, it's important to note, ma'am, that it's a time when we all have to come together because a decision has to be made. We come together, and that's why for the Oworon Shoki, I pulled a few friends together. The target is to raise 50 million, forgive me. We've been able to raise 9 million so far, and till we get to that target. That's
as a form of intervention for the people of
That's the point where everybody comes together. The whole community comes together.
That's a silver lining. We must thank you very much. A very productive conversation. We've been talking with the Commissioner for Waterfront Development in Lagos,
Waterfront Infrastructure.
Mr. Dayo Bush Alebiosho. Thank you so much, sir,
for coming on the program.